It's Sunday, and it's that time. Looks like the southern hemisphere is on fire, or at least under severe fire risk. Not just Chile. There's a huge swath of Argentina that's, under extreme fire danger. A huge band of the African continent, the central portion of the African continent, and the southern portion too. India, the tip of India is under extreme fire risk right now, and it looks like half of Australia is under extreme fire risk as well.
Oh yeah, we're getting into that part of the year.
Did the southern hemisphere get hit by like some massive whip of coronal mass ejection that we didn't hear about?
Maybe, but this is also while there's an atmospheric river happening on the west coast of the United States, which is like um, the amount of rainfall they were getting was unprecedented.
Yeah.
It was like, what was it, 100 inches in some places, I think.
I saw this this thing. It said 90210 is uninhabitable or something like that. The the zip code in California, the one that was made famous by a TV show like 30 years ago. Yeah, that's the very same place. Apparently, there was so much mud and water accumulation that it's like a disaster. Like a real fancy version of New Orleans when Katrina happened. It's crazy to think that there are super affluent portions of this country that just aren't, they're not keeping pace with extreme weather changes.
Yeah, it's really crazy. It's like I I don't know if people who don't believe in science are gonna ever put it together, but I feel like even the like the most hardcore anti climate change person is gonna have to acknowledge some shit is different. And I know they'll try to be like, oh, it's God punishing whoever they think, like, what if it's the gay people, or I don't know if they're pro or anti Jewish person, you know, it's like you never know, like, but they want to make it seem like any sort of
Man, I love
natural
how
disaster is God punishing people for something.
I love how we can never fully understand God's will when it comes to pretty much anything, including war. But for some reason, some people really know what God has to say about the weather. Like,
Well, and it's really funny, like, not to go off on a religious tangent.
I didn't mean to go down that hallway, but man.
No. There's just so many things that I think, like, popular culture has inundated us with a lot of imagery that is not only disconnected from what the Bible says, but it's meant in a way to make people think about religion in a way, in the same way that stained glass is meant to manipulate people who don't know how to read. And so when people think about Christianity and judgment, it's so disconnected from what's actually happening in like, nobody's in heaven. If let's say a Christian heaven actually exists, like, nobody's there. There's like two specific events before anybody who is like born after certain points gets into heaven. If you're born before Jesus was born, it's like you have a judgment day that all the souls are basically waiting. I don't know if it's like a giant fucking container that just holds all the souls, or like they just wander around limbo, because limbo is completely different. It's like there's Hades and there's limbo and there's heaven and there's hell, and all of these things are not the same. But even down to, like, if you're born after Jesus, then you can accept him as your Lord and Savior, but he still has to come back, and like the final battle has to happen before the souls make it into heaven. So there's still, like, anybody who dies is not like looking down, like even in the fantastical situation that heaven actually existed as like a supernatural place. That's not even how it works, but like we're so inundated with this imagery in our media that I don't think it's an accident. And I mean, I know it's not an accident, but even down to like the notion of Christmas is very much a capitalist holiday that has like couched itself in religion to protect itself from any sort of scrutiny, but further it has like I saw what they did to Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Jesus was an anti-capitalist at the least. He was anti-imperialist very much, anti-monarchist very much, and potentially anti-nationalist, even though like the nation state was in its nascent stages at that time. So there's all these things about like taking Jesus's identity and basically whittling it down to this baby who's born and then 33 years later dies and cuts out everything in the middle, because basically everything in the middle is anti-capitalism, or at that time, since capitalism hadn't really developed, it's anti-exploitation is what it comes down to. He doesn't want anybody to be exploited. And so cutting all that out and turning him into this like sheepish, literally sheepish fucking baby is no coincidence in terms of like, if the dude actually existed, the idea was to like be anti-establishment. That's literally all he does is anti-establishment shit. So in modern times, to see capitalism turn him as an identity into the biggest capitalist fucking holiday besides behind Black Friday is when I'm like, oh, it's the same shit with like putting Che Guevara on a t-shirt and selling it for fucking $35. It's like how they turn people who have these ideals into things to be commodified and then become products of capitalism in ways that completely undermines the thing that those people represented. And it didn't start in modern times. Like that's where it's one of those things where I'm like, oh shit, I see this thing, because the reason I went from Dr. Martin Luther King to Jesus in terms of that particular issue is because right-wingers will often weaponize the I have a dream speech to try to be like, racism, calling out racism is actually the racist thing. And you're supposed to not worry about the color of someone's skin and focus on the content of the character, and then literally ignore everything else that Dr. Martin Luther King went through or said, and the fact that his fucking daughter is still alive on Twitter, constantly debunking anytime someone tries to invoke him, like pro or against Israel. He said things about Israel that now people try to take out of context and frame, where his daughter's like, no, that's not how he would say, or that's not how he would believe. So that's not accurate. But people will still just ignore her opinion about her own fucking father. And that's the same shit when Quentin Tarantino tried to act like he knew fucking Bruce Lee more than goddamn Shannon Lee. That fucking stupid asshole. Goddamn, I don't care how many, I mean, he hasn't made that many films. I don't care what fucking films you've made in the canon of film history. Telling someone that you know their father better than them, no matter when that person died relative to their kid, especially when he never actually met him. That's some of the most colonialist shit. That's where I was always on the fence about Quentin Tarantino, because I didn't know if his like black thing was culture vulturing or him growing up around black people and having that be part of him. But now I know for very certain that it's culture vulture shit, because he tried to do that shit with Chinese culture. And that's where I'm like, Bruce Lee is not the only Chinese culture that Americans know, but I think he's probably the most widely accepted, not on accident, because that was basically his like goal towards the end of his life, is to bring Chinese and American culture together. So that's not accidental. But in that, when you have some fucking asshole American trying to claim connection to Bruce Lee and by proxy to Chinese culture over the man's own fucking daughter, that shit is not isolated out of common practice, especially when it's a woman involved. Because it's like JFK Jr. never did shit except be a man, basically. But he got to like be his own person, and the media treated him as if he was gonna do some like world-changing shit because he was JFK Jr., but because he was a man, and that expectation, like, not only does it not hold with daughters of famous people or like activists or people who've done some shit.
So Paris Jackson was in the news the other day for covering up her tattoos to go to an awards event. You know, speaking of daughters of celebrities who aren't held up to high expectations.
Yeah.
But I think that she was completely isolated from the media, as best as Michael could do it. So I think that's different.
I mean,
that's like a very intentional thing.
She has her own like music career.
That's true.
And I've never like listened to it in recent times, but it was like, I think she was trying to do in the same way that Willow Smith was trying not to be in her dad's shadow, but also like if you're the offspring of one of the most talented people on the planet, it's not really surprised that you're gonna do some fucking
cool shit.
Yeah. So the idea of these people being Nepo babies a lot of times, I'm like, yeah, that holds in some cases, but like Willow Smith is talented as fuck. She's been talented since she was like 8 years old. Jaden Smith is talented as fuck. He's been talented since he could talk. So like all Nepo babies are not equal to me. Apparently, our voices have no bass right now, and they're fast. So I don't know if something's going on with the playback.
And it's fast, like sped up.
Yeah, and apparently it's on normal playback speed. So,
good grief.
Maybe if we talk slowly, it will offset.
Fucking YouTube.
This is the David Lynch episode where we speed it up and then slow down our voices.
But that doesn't. I mean, that's not generally how it works. How about now? Has there any bass returned? Is there any low frequency in the voice box? I wonder how long the delay is. I bet it's like 12, 13 seconds, 40 seconds. Who knows?
Well, it's interesting in that I feel like that time compression causes some weird dilation, distortion things happening where it's like if somebody's in the other room listening to what is happening in here and they're on a 12-second delay, but it's sped up so they're almost in line, it's like that's like the most physical expression of time dilation.
Maybe because you're further from the sun than I am in this moment, like just by a few, I don't know how many miles it would be, like parallax distance. But maybe because there's a slight difference in gravity relative to the sun, you're experiencing a different No, that wouldn't make any sense
You know,
either.
So this is gonna sound, it's not really tangential, but I feel like a lot of people don't think about what's happening with their cell phones. And when I was studying hardware devices, it was like mind blowing to me. And I'm gonna try to explain this the best way possible. Like, in terms of when you're thinking about a Wi-Fi signal, people think about it in this just like continuous stream in the same way. Like when you're plugged into something, you think it's just a constant stream of information, even though it's obviously sent in not obviously, even though it's sent in packets over the internet. People think of information streams as these continuous things, but when you're moving, the information stream is going to degrade based on the energy that was sent out, based on your position at the start of the signal, and at the end of the signal, your position might not be at the same place. So it basically, like, the frequencies through which a cell phone is cycling is like over a band so that it doesn't let the signal degrade too much between the beginning and the end of the wave that's being sent. And so it's like cycling through different frequencies and leaving it's pushing the information through multiple frequencies, but your phone is like cycling through them to keep up with your movement in space to which frequency is most likely going to have the best signal compared to your position in space time. It's really fucking crazy because then it comes down to like the power charge. So that's where like the power cycling your phone through all those frequencies is the reason, is one of, not the, but one of the reasons that phones are these amazing machines now that have all this computing power, but it's even down to certain shit. Like that was something that started taking place around the Nextel, the fucking Wi-Fi or the walkie-talkie radios. So they're like,
oh, those phones were awesome.
Yeah, that technology is why Nextel's patent and Nextel's technology was so unique and why they had a market in it like hold for so long. But once other companies started building in the capacity to basically encrypt those phone calls while not allowing the phone call to degrade, is when Nextel basically faded into non-existence.
Yeah.
And it's not the same thing with BlackBerry, but it happened around a similar time where like there's a lot. This is also why I think it's really easy to believe in conspiracy theories about aliens and Roswell and shit, because the computing jumps have been so tremendous. But if you actually just go back and look at the history, it all tracks in terms of all of the jumps happen when they were supposed to, actually. Most people just don't read the continuous history of computing to realize like, oh, even before the microchips existed, people were like postulating about what a laptop device would even be like.
Oh yeah, the Dynabook.
Yeah, which is like
a laptop.
It pretty accurately depicts what that shit's gonna be like, even though the name's not right.
Even Picard's console at his desk in his in the captain's office, whatever, like that thing was a little laptop. So they're still using laptops in the future.
Sure. I mean, I think by that time they had the IBM ThinkPads. They were very
oh yeah, they were gigantic,
but they were basically a portable word processor.
Oh yeah, I think my mom had like an Apple book looking thing, like it was black. No, it was like really dark gray, it was monochrome and a trackball. It was like its screen was very similar to high-end synthesizers, like analog synthesizer type screens, where you're practically reading the output of a spreadsheet. Like, it was barely a GUI.
Well, and
I think we have calculators now that are more powerful than that computer was.
Oh, for sure. But the issue is, because there was no graphic user interface for people who don't know what GUI is, the people who grew up with DOS had to learn what GUI streamlined. And I think that's where what you and I understand from growing up with DOS, other people had to take college courses and get degrees in computer science to understand. And that's where there's like, it's not even that they were dumb or didn't get it. It's that growing up with DOS, actually engaging it and then seeing the transition to what became the click version of accessing DOS, with people not even really understanding what DOS was.
I mean, if you know your file system and you know the name of all your executables or anything that you want to open, then a command line is extremely fast. I mean, I've seen some keyboard ninjas open up, and I just want to be very specific, open applications and files, but not actually, go too deep, faster than anything you could do with a mouse. But they also know exactly what they're doing, because they're essentially athletes at that point. And there are a lot of things that are conceptually way easier to grasp and execute visually with a mouse. Because you don't have to like know everything exactly. You can intuitively find the solution somewhere embedded deep within a menu somewhere.
For sure, but at the same time, I'm sure there's someone on the exact other end of that spectrum who can program macros on a mouse to do everything faster, if not faster to the point where it's like, oh, I didn't even think that was possible. Because I think that's where, if command line was inherently faster than...
Oh, it's not. You have to be an absolute keyboard athlete. Olympic grade keyboard athlete.
If you could, you would only compare that keyboard athlete to the novice or regular mouse user. But then you compare the athlete mouse user to the keyboard athlete. The mouse athlete's still going to be faster in terms of...
Oh yeah, because conceptually you can see everything in front of you, and you don't have to access everything through a single line of characters.
Yeah, and they can change the distance that they have to move their mouse or trackball to move the mouse relative on the screen, where you can change the keyboard. They do definitely have keyboards where you can move the keys around, but it's not going to result in that's not necessarily going to result in less latency in your typing, whereas actually changing the distance that the pointer or the cursor moves on the screen can dramatically change how someone can point and click with a mouse, which is where,
oh yeah, like modern
versus
modern hacking competitions. Those guys don't even use keyboards. They just plug in some macro laden version of a tiny Linux or a Raspberry Pi or something, and they plug it in, and then it does all the good stuff, and it sends it to their phone in this really cool little output. It's like, what do you want to do next? It's like, I watched this video where this guy was talking about how he's like, I know that Kali Linux is still used to teach a lot of ethical hacking principles and application and penetration testing principles and all that kind of stuff. But he was talking about this level of hacking that's we don't even touch keyboards anymore, because they carry all their stuff ready to go. and like on the level once they're demonstrating like the faults of the security of a complex like enterprise grade system, they're like scraping stuff from people's emails and the other people's keyboard strokes. It's insane, and it's all like pre-configured practically. It makes me wonder, like, if anyone in the last decade has actually been paying attention to like best practices. Even like, has security just been like that? Has there been that much of a lapse in the development in software security and network security? Are we like trusting the ISP too much?
Yes, on all counts, and it goes beyond that because just like right now, it's actually insanely comical how our podcast sounds. We sound like children or like someone who is in a room full of helium and they don't know that the helium is there, and the voices constantly keeps getting higher and higher, where I'm like, I didn't think it would be as bad as it actually is. But when I heard you talking, it was like, I don't know if anybody's watched Bob's Burgers, but there's like a point where Gene records Bob on his keyboard and he just starts playing him on like he plays him back on like different keys, and when he gets up to the highest version, it sounds like, oh, this is definitely he's meant to be mocked when you're playing it like that. It sounds like YouTube is mocking us and running our voices at this speed just to make us sound ridiculous. It doesn't even make sense. Like, somebody would probably have to play, because I think the timing is normal. It's like the speed is actually in line with what it is, but the voices are really high, even though technically that should only be possible if it's being done actively.
I'm not doing any active pitch shifting, I promise. I don't have any. I have tools that can do this, but they're not even on.
So apparently slowing it down doesn't actually even restore the bass into our voices. So it's like, it's not the speed. So YouTube's quality control has fallen off. They're not the only one, their security was never good. They're not the only ones, but I feel like that's a symptom of the American economy that's like, giving tech bros the reins was clearly a mistake, but also allowing people to bet against things was a mistake. I don't know if an economy should ever have betting. Like, I don't know if betting for is possible without someone betting against. So that's where philosophically I'm not pro. I'm okay with gambling, but not in an economy, in terms of people shouldn't be gambling on businesses, because then actual industries and people's lives get tied to some whims. And that, to me, obviously it's like one of the biggest problems, but Wall Street and the stock market making themselves seem like they're so important, and then by proxy getting so much capital tied up into them, have become this self-fulfilling prophecy of stagnates. Like, that approach does not promote risk on the business side, but then only the most risky get rewarded. So it's like you have to either completely follow your business's industry standard and do everything completely by the book to try to stay afloat, or try to be this disruptor and do everything the opposite of whatever the industry has decided is the standard. And there's really no in between. And that kind of like...
I'm going to restart the stream because I think that I see what's going on.